everyone. Good morning, everyone. May I request you to take your seats, please? Please take your seats. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pranjal Borkatuki, and I'm the Director of Events with TradeWinds. It gives me great pleasure to welcoming you all today to the TradeWinds Shipowners Forum here in Singapore, held during the Singapore Maritime Week 2026. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces and a few new ones. Thank you all very much for coming together today. We have a packed agenda with a lot of brilliant discussions that are coming up, but before we get to there, we have a few housekeeping rules that I would like to run them by you. The hotel people, the staff of this hotel told us that there is no planned fire drill today. So if you hear the fire alarm going off, please leave the building through those exits or these exits calmly, however calm you could be. And when we do an event in a venue as nice as this, it's a very expensive proposition, and we couldn't have done it without the support from our sponsors. Thank you to all our sponsors. We are also very thankful for SSA and MPA, Singapore Maritime Week organizers, for recognizing TradeWinds as a key trade media partner. We have an event app. The app is your go-to resources if you would like to know the agenda and the flow of the day, and you get to know more about the speakers. And you also can connect with your fellow delegates if you have the app. So if you can, I encourage you to download the app by following this QR code. It's very easy to access the app. Your login ID will be the email that you have registered this event for, and the password is Singapore 2026. Very importantly, as an audience, you can engage with the moderator if you have the app. If time permits, then the moderator will pick up a question or two from the floor, and you, as an audience, take part in the conversation from the floor. So I encourage you to download the app if you could, or you can access the app through the browser if you are fussy about not downloading yet another app on your phone. And the QR code is also available right behind the badge. If you take any photo today, and if you decide to post it on your social media channels like LinkedIn, Facebook, X, may I encourage you to use the hashtag TradeWindsEvents so that we can locate them, we can like them, or we can even share them. As I said, we have a packed agenda today with a lot of brilliant discussions and keynote interviews that are coming up. And to take us through the day, with the solid lineup of speakers that we have, we will have Julian Bray, Editor-in-Chief of TradeWinds, who will lead us through the entire day with the discussions and the panels. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite Julian up on the stage to lead us the day. And Julian, please. Thank you all.
Thank you, Pranjal, for that very kind introduction. Distinguished guests, industry leaders, colleagues, and friends, good morning and welcome again to this TradeWinds Shipowners Forum. It's a privilege to open this global gathering at such a pivotal moment for shipping, and particularly here at the heart of one of the world's most dynamic maritime clusters. Singapore has long stood as a crossroads of trade, innovation, and maritime excellence. And as ever, shipping sits at the center of the global economy. Yet today, its operations are being tested in ways that have not been seen for generations. And it is at the center of world attention due to the energy crisis caused by the conflict in the Middle East. Geopolitical tensions are reshaping trade routes, fragmenting supply chains, and introducing new layers of uncertainty into regulation and compliance. What was once a largely predictable framework of global trade is becoming more complex and at times more contested. At the same time, the industry is engaged in an intense and necessary debate over decarbonization. Not whether to act, most thinking people are pretty united on that, but how fast, by what mechanisms, and with whose support. These are not abstract questions. They go to the heart of investment decisions, competitiveness, and the long-term sustainability of shipping itself. And of course, we're navigating a challenging financial landscape. Market volatility, cost pressures, capital constraints are forcing difficult choices across fleets, balance sheets, and business models. Prices of new and second-hand ships are high, as is fuel and labor prices as well, and all are rising. But so are freight rates. The Clarksey index of operating earnings is double the 10-year trend at present. Yet despite all these tensions, shipping endures. It endures because of the people behind it, the crews who keep vessels moving under all conditions, the operators and owners who take risks and adapt, and the wider ecosystem that continues to innovate and collaborate. If there is one defining quality of this industry, it's resilience. Not passive endurance, but active adaptation. Played out through the crises of the last 5 years, and now in real time in front of our eyes as the world is at war in the Middle East. So over the coming day, let us be clear-eyed about the challenges, but equally confident of our capacity to meet them. Let's use this forum to debate honestly, to share insight, and to shape the future of shipping with purpose. Thank you again for being here, and I wish you a productive and inspiring conference. Thank you. Now, for our first Leadership Spotlight keynote of the day, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Cyril Decaux from the CEO of Eastern Pacific. Cyril, please join me. Yep, please. Cyril, you're CEO of Eastern Pacific, not only one of the world's biggest ship owners, but consistently one of the most innovative, and you're committed to green and technology-driven growth through the industry. You have around 7,000 staff under your command. With ships on the water and an order book, about 360 ships, 36 million tons. The statistics are frankly eye-popping. But this world we're in, when sort of geopolitics becomes an operational issue, it's no longer abstract. It's affecting routes and compliance and counterparties. How is this world changing the way you approach running the business?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I fully agree what's happening currently in the world. The level of geopolitical uncertainties we're facing is nothing like what we've seen before. I think everybody sitting on the shipping panels over the last couple of decades always say that we are facing a volatile environment, but this is very different, I feel. We have a proper breakdown on kind of the world order, the way we've known it in the last 80 years. And the most important element there is that the supranational organizations like United Nations, NATO, or IMO for us is kind of really losing traction, power, and ability to influence the industry. So this level of uncertainty and jeopardy risk is very much part of the equation for us. And when we think about the way we run an organization, actually maybe as a side comment, this morning I looked at my phone and I saw an article, maybe a trend with somebody yesterday on a panel said that because of the wars, there was no more strategy in shipping. Strategy were up in the air. I actually think is wrong. Maybe this was taken out of context, but I think it's very wrong. In an uncertain environment like that, your strategy matters even more. And when you think about strategy, I mean, ship owners tend to only think about asset play strategy. You know, you want to buy cheap, operate cheap, finance cheap, and sell expensive, hopefully. But it's very hard to time all of these things. And in a volatile environment, your strategy should be about building a resilient organization, like as you said in your introduction speech. An organization that can review, analyze the events, make quick decisions, and turn that into action in a matter of days. You know, don't wait for the next board meeting or the next advisors to tell you, you know, after the facts and it's too late. There's a lot of things that we can do. And if you have an organization like that, that is nimble, adaptive, you actually, you know, you tend to outperform the market consistently when you're faced with events. And at the end of the day, it's core to our strategy.
This is just one of the points I was going to raise with you, because there's this tension between flexibility and conviction of the strategy you've maybe been holding. Yeah. When the world is fragmented and unpredictable, conviction becomes stubbornness, flexibility can become weakness. How do you balance and work out the course to follow?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a balancing act. The way we think about it is you try to be resilient in your long-term conviction. The way it translates at EPS is that we have a medium to long-term plan. The current plan, we call it the EPS 2030 plan. It's a very engaged plan that we produce after consultation with all the managers, brainstorming. We put it on paper, and what's important is that we disseminate that through the organization, all the way to the seafarers. And that's all encompassing. That's commercial, organizational, environmental play, you know, technical, and by having this plan, you put everybody on one single road or objectives, and then we look at more short-term levels, you know, objectives. We also have annual objectives, like every organization. So we say, okay, this year I want to expand in this segment, I want to sell this segment, I want to open an office here, I want to recruit more Filipino seafarers, for example. The short-term objectives are crucial. You need to keep the organization accountable for those, but that's where you should not be too stubborn. You know, only a donkey doesn't change his mind, right? So if you think that you're wrong, adjust, correct, and come up with, you know, your next path. And we've done that many times as an organization. You know, you have to be humble that you're not always right. You know, 7 years ago, as part of our strategic plan, we had that an objective to get out of the car carrier business. Yeah. So this never makes money, and it's not very interesting, and it's too fragmented, too niche. And then, you know, we realized we were wrong. We saw an opportunity, and we built up probably one of the biggest independent PCTC fleets in the world. We opened a new range of customers that we never expected, and you know, we were totally wrong, but we managed to adapt that strategy.
You talk about taking those strategic decisions and developing areas of the business, both in the verticals and then geographically. Mm-hmm. You've got a company that's sort of distributed globally, not just in Singapore, with other headquarters. How do you ensure that the decision-making and the thinking and the development is aligned across that, across those different sectors and across those different geographies? That must be very challenging.
Yeah, that's never easy, I think. Every multinational organization faces these dilemmas, and you know, with that, you know, is internal politics that develops not invented here syndromes inside the organizations that, you know, can cripple you when you need to be moving extremely fast. Look, for us, it's back down to good, you know, people management. We have big commercial centers in London, in Oslo, and Singapore is our headquarters. We need to have a very good cross-fertilization of these centers, so we encourage people to experience and have, you know, work in our satellite office, going both ways. And then, generally speaking, we make sure that the people that are facing the clients, the front-facing part of the organization, you know, for us on the gas business is in Oslo, on the containers, car carriers in London. tankers and dry bulk is in Singapore. We make sure that they have very good connection with all the managers, and when they get feedback from the charterers or the clients that believe will bring value to the organization long term, but they're empowered to make that happen. How do we do it concretely, Julian? Is we try to bring people together as often as we can. Sometimes we take them out of the comfort zone and not shipping, pure shipping discussion. I like to take them on bike rides.
We'll come to that.
But it's back to kind of basic kind of team buildings and make sure that your people kind of really gel and that you don't create your silos.
You talked about feedback from charterers, the customers. Shipping is supposedly a service industry, isn't it? You're supposed to be serving customers.
Yes.
Although I must admit, there are parts of the industry that do make every effort to appear to be serving themselves first and foremost, and nobody else.
True.
Do you think that your management of that critical relationship is a way of setting you apart and differentiating you from some competitors, be able to listen to charterers and feed their appetites more successfully?
Yeah, very much so. I think it's, at least for us, this has been a big change in the last couple of years, is how we stop thinking about our charterers as charterers, more as clients, and try to provide a level of service that goes just beyond a ship and a crew and the ability to bring cargo from A to B. What we saw in the last few years, I think we all saw it in our organization, is the level of sophistication that is expected from an operator has gone up, not just one notch, but probably 5 or 6 notches. Now you need to have a fleet optimization team. You need to be able to trade your EU ETS. You need to have a view on what technology you can apply on the ships to reduce emissions. All these dialogues bring a lot of value, and it's been driven by the clients, and there was a real need. And everything that's happening in the world right now, at IMO or geopolitically, I don't think it changes that aspect. The expectations there, they are first driven by our clients. For the clients, it's driven by their customers, it's driven by the population, it's driven by us, by the people, and that are very kind of aware of these issues. And where we see that we need to provide a level of service that is drastically different from what used to be the traditional owner-operator of the past. Yeah.
It was fascinating yesterday to visit your newest tanker, this MR tanker, the Pacific Sunstone, out here in the Roads. A tanker with the first tanker new build with wind sails from the shipyard rather than retrofitted. It raised 2 interesting issues for me. First of all, your attitude towards building your treatment of staff and crews and the team building there, and the efforts you're putting into doing that. And then, of course, the question of decarbonisation and managing those issues. On that question of the company's approach to handling and supporting its crews and broader land-based staff, EPS does have a reputation for putting a lot of effort into treating people well, to cut a long story short. Actually providing them with the facilities that they can enjoy their life rather than just suffer it as a task. What are the benefits you see to the company of doing that?
Yeah, tremendous benefits. I'll explore on that. But first of all, maybe before I get into the actual benefits, what we really try to do is to treat every single seafarer as full-fledged employees. We don't differentiate. It's not onshore and offshore. They're all part of one same organization. When I was talking earlier about our long-term objectives, a cadet in my fleet should know about our long-term objectives. It's been public available to him or her. Yeah. And we try to really shorten that distance between the boardroom and the cadet. This is how drastic as well we try to achieve. So we have a level of engagement with the seafarers that is very strong. I don't know if it's the best of the industry, but I can see it's very strong. People can speak up, give a very valuable feedback. And by showing that you care and having all this program to improve the work-life balance of the seafarers, it's all encompassing. It's like quality of the accommodation, the food, the connectivity, how you engage with them through social medias. What you see is that they have a willingness to do the right thing for the organization that is beyond anything. I mean, hopefully you saw it yesterday, when the impression that one gets when you step on our ships, I keep telling people it's crucial, whether it's a port captain or a representative from the charterers or VIP guests that we might bring on board, you have to treat them extremely well. If one of our clients wants to try a new solution, like the suction sails, or we have many like this, you have to spend the time and the efforts, and you'll be put in direct communication with counterparts on the operation side of the clients that will ask you all these questions, and you have to be aware that this is a very core part of the commercial dialogues that we're having. And we see the level of engagement we have from our seafarers is fantastic. You step on the ship, people are smiling, the ship is clean, tidy, well run. I think first impression matter, but I think we keep a lot of focus on that.
It was certainly an impressive-looking ship with the three wind sails, and EPS has been the forefront of a lot of work in that area. You're building the ammonia carriers in China, and you've got ammonia engines coming through. I heard yesterday that Everlens have now taken another step in developing their ammonia engine. With the decarbonisation process within the shipping industry having hit difficult waters now, you could say. Yeah. A critical issue we're seeing from the energy transition. I was reading yesterday about the rapid upturn in the sales of electric cars in Europe just in the past month because of the impact of the energy crisis. A lot of the process of decarbonisation, surely everywhere, has to be to do with self-interest, vested self-interest. What do you see as the value for EPS in pursuing decarbonisation strategies in particular parts of the fleet where it is particularly relevant at this process?
And the first thing I'd like to say that at EPS we haven't gone so deep into the decarbonization journey just because of the regulation or the net zero framework, but it's also because we saw that this is what our clients require, but we also see that this is what the community as a whole wants. I see it with my staff. My staff, especially my younger staff, they want to work for a company with purpose. Right? And if an organization doesn't have this purpose, it's not able to express that purpose, it's a slow death. You're not going to be able to get the new generation of talent within your company. Now you asked me about where do we benefit. You have tangible and intangible here. The tangible thing would say, oh yes, I charter the ships to BHP for an extra 500 or 1,000 a day, but it always get mingled into the commercial negotiation, so you don't know what is part of your green attributes and what is part of your commercial position. But I see that the quality of the dialogue that we have across all the segments, I think is quite unique for a company like us, which are active in 8 different segments, to be able to pierce through kind of the top clients, the top leagues, 400-500 type companies, and still be competitive in this market. It's because they see that we're adding this extra value. We might not get it on that ship. I might not get it on that specific paint coating that I'm putting. But next time there's an opportunity, they'll come to me, they'll give me a first crack at it, and then maybe I will benefit some other ways. And it's worked out very well for us, I have to say. And you also have to look at it as a portfolio. So you cannot just put all your money in one solution, and because it doesn't work, then you're a bit stuck.
I was going to mention that to you because obviously the last 6 months or so, there's been something of a tidal wave of VLCC orders, of course, and nearly all of those have been conventionally fueled vessels, and yourselves included. That is simply you taking a pragmatic look at what is on offer and where that particular market is likely to be in the next 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, I think there's the realization that within all the segments, there's various speeds in the adoptions of new technology, new fuels, being LNG or ammonia and so on. And we have to also be pragmatic, and the oil transportation business and the oil majors have probably been the slowest of all the segments that we've seen. The few that were at the forefront.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, some were at the forefront, made some drastic U-turns. So at the end of the day, for some of the segments of sub-segments, if I cannot see a market for it, I have to accept the reality. And that's part of what we were saying earlier, to be able to react quickly and take decisions. So don't be too dogmatic about your decision. If it's important for you to test the concept and you believe it in long term, like our belief in ammonia, we did scale back our new building programs on ammonia, but we stayed the course. We're going to deliver ships in October with ammonia-fueled engines. When the market comes, the market will come, and we will be ready for it.
Looking ahead more broadly at the outlook for shipping markets, as I said, today there is a lot of strength on the moment, but there's a lot of ingrained inflation as well. Prices for everything appear to be moving up and moving up significantly. Yes. And I think it would be a very bold person to suggest that prices would fall. Is that going to change the structure of the business looking ahead, do you think?
Inflation?
Yes.
In
the way this is working?
I think, look, it's been a theme for the last year and a half that inflation finally came to shipping. And, the first driver in the inflation of the vessel prices. I think we got to a point where there's no big new shipping nations coming on the horizons to replace China.
Yeah.
And
there's no new China.
Yes, there's no new China. And cost in China, labor costs, natural resources costs have gone up. The Chinese shipyard, I think, are doing good business at the moment, but are not booking super profits either. So it's hard to see that prices will go down materially from here unless you go into a global downturn, and that would kind of reset that equation. So from where I see, yes, I believe that inflation is come to shipping. It's also true on the running cost of the ships, daily running costs. Salaries have gone up, just a fact, and we cannot run a Capesize bulker for less than $5,000 a day, which used to be the case. So now we have to adapt, which means that everything will have to come in sync. And yes, freight rates are elevated in some segments. At the moment, it's a lot of have to do with geopolitics, but I think the cost of that service going forward is likely to stay elevated higher than the historical average.
Will that impact? Presumably, it will impact the investment case, of course, across the piece.
Yes.
Do you see any break points, any critical issues coming up on the horizon immediately?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that not everywhere, but in some segments, one has to make pretty heroic assumptions on time charter rates for the life of the ships before you make an investment decision at the moment. But first of all, it's not true of every segment. So, and you also have to kind of go back to the basics and the good old monitoring of the order book and the fleet replacements. Yes, the order book is currently at a level that's similar to what we had in 2008 and 2009. So it's not a simple decision, but unlike that period, first of all, the economy is a lot more global than it used to be. You need a lot more ships. Population has increased, and you have a huge replacement dilemma for all these ships that was built now 15 years ago, or delivered 15 years ago. Yep. So there's like pros and minuses, and you have to look at that full picture before you take that decision. But I agree, you're at a point where it's not a simple investment case anymore.
Cyril, we're out of time, but before you go, I can't not mention some of the way you've brought sport and physical activity into the company, and particularly cycling, which is your and one of my interests. And EPS is part owner of one of Europe's most famous pro cycling teams as well, Movistar. Again, going back to this question of building culture within the company, what does having sort of an active role, personal active role in joining your staff in activity, in not only sporting activity but cultural activities? What does that do to the culture of the company? How does it improve it?
First of all, good question. My favorite question so far.
We could have spent 20 minutes on this. I know, but we shouldn't.
No, it's back to what I was mentioning earlier. Like you were asking me about the regional offices, how you coordinate people. It's true of regional offices. It's true of your teams and functions within the organization. When you're able to bring a large portion of your organization in this type of activity together, it completely changed the dynamics. I think we all experience that. If we work and we have a good colleague, and then all of a sudden we spend a nice weekend together and do something different, it changes the relationship. You learn to understand the person, how they think, what they expect, how they to react. If you bring it to like a more competitive level, like in cycling, some of the things that we do, you see how people react under pressure. And kind of the bonds that you create with your colleagues is fantastic, and I've seen a real impact. I mean, cycling is the one I do the most personally, so it tends to have a good traction in the organization. People want to also have some airtime. So I'd like to take my colleagues like it's very hard to catch me for 5 minutes in the office during the day, right? But if you come on a bike ride in the morning with me, you're going to have me for 2 hours, and you can ask everything you want. So,
and even your owner is taken to the bike.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Offer is a keen cyclist as well. It's fantastic, and maybe he's doing the same to me. But but it's great. I've seen that changing the culture. And the way our colleagues interact. And we actually, to my point earlier, we even involve some of our seafarers in that thing. So our seafarers have very good gyms, and they have bikes in the gyms, and they can join some virtual challenges with us. It's been fantastic as bringing people together. So it's all down to the old management tool of using sports as an aggregator of an organization, and for us is worked really well.
Cyril, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. If you'd like to show your appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Good luck. And now, may I invite the speakers on the first panel to come up to the stage. The first panel, Shipping in the Crossfire. Thank you. Hi, Thomas. Take a seat. I mean, I'm sure people can work out from what you look like and the pictures.
Hi, good to see you.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you indeed for coming. As I said, this first panel, shipping in the crossfire. Shipping is an instrument of geopolitics, and how should the industry respond? It's fair to say this whole issue has become significantly more complicated and contentious in recent years because of everything that has been going on. What was once was a relatively stable operating environment is now shaped by political tension, regulatory divergence, and shifting trade patterns. And the implications are being felt across the entire value chain, from cargo owners to ship owners to policymakers. And it's a great pleasure to have this panel with us today of senior figures. We have Emma Roberts, Vice President of Marine and Supply Chain Excellence at BHP, the world's biggest mining company, leading its global freight and supply chain organization and based here in Singapore. At the far end, we have Peter Lai, the global head of shipping of Anglo American, also based in Singapore and responsible for all Anglo American's group ocean freight activity. Punit Oza, the president of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, but of course it goes a lot deeper than that. Many years, 30 plus years as a senior dry bulk executive in Precious Shipping, Noble Group and Clavinus, and now actually as the founder and director of a digital startup, Maritime Next, which raises fresh issues. And last but certainly not least, a great pleasure to see Thomas Kazakos, the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping, who succeeded Guy Platten last year, and the former Director General of the Cyprus Shipping Chamber. From that position, he was heavily involved in the ICS over many years himself, of course. Shipping as a geopolitical tool and a geopolitical problem, if you like, is it a new reality or an old story? Thomas, could I start with you? From your vantage point at in the ICS, you see both governments and industry very close up the whole time. Do you feel something has fundamentally changed, or is this really just a more visible and a more visceral version of what's always been there?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. May I just use the opportunity to say well done to Cyril from the excellent fire chat you had before. I was yesterday at the panel on the issue about, he mentioned that, I wasn't me, someone else, another panelist said about the shipping has no strategy. In all fairness, however, because I was there, I can confirm that it was taken out of context. What was said was that shipping, in terms of strategy, keeps changing every day due to the geopolitical changes that we've seen. So to put the record straight, and I think that's part of your job, Julian, and your colleagues to make sure that we'd love to be given the opportunity to comment on these things, but at the same time, it has to be because the issue of accurate information, accurate news, I'm not going to say fake news or anything like that, it's also important for us. So sorry for the diversion.
Take it. Comment taken.
Yeah.
Appreciate
So as far as the comment that you said that yes, geopolitics, shipping is it's a very old industry. We live through these changes. It's not the first time. Maybe this time it receives a lot more attention because of the nature of the geopolitics that we live through. Yes, as International Chamber of Shipping, representing the international shipowning community, it's part of our daily job to keep contact with governments and international organizations. For us, these developments, as we see it, is not new, and we feel that when it comes to, it's a motto of improvise, adapt, overcome. It was said also before that our industry is resilient, but of course resilience needs to have 2 or 3 elements. One, of course, is stable international regulatory framework, basic principles of navigation, and we've been talking through the Strait of Hormuz, and of course, the predictable operational framework. For us, the use of shipping as a geopolitical power, of course, does not find us in agreement, especially when it comes to our seafarers, because you mentioned before, this is our primary asset in terms of investment for attracting youth and talent to the industry. We will, of course, continue those discussions with the governments in the sense that we need to turn this a bit around. For the reasons that I don't need to explain, shipping the last few years, if not months, has been receiving a lot of attention. And maybe this time is one of the few times that is not part of let's say, a disaster or an accident or negative. It's been used in a way to show the importance of our industry, not just for trade, but social cohesion as well as for growth. And this is part of our responsibility, together with our partners in the governments as well as the industry, to show the resilience, the adaptability, but the commitment of our industry to make sure that we remain relevant for development of growth and trade. So we don't see it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to turn it around and show, yes, can you live without shipping? What work would be without shipping? This is the message we're trying to use. Use an opportunity, a challenge to make it into an opportunity.
In journalistic terms, never let a good crisis go to waste, as I think Churchill
In a
once
constructive way, though.
said. In a constructive way. In a constructive way. Emma, coming from BHP and your background in international relations and public policy in an earlier time, are you seeing more direct government involvement and pressure from sort of the world of geopolitics? And I know it's an easy and a dangerous issue to kick around. Over into commercial decision making, and is that changing your attitude to risk and strategy?
Look, I think, Julian, so I've been in this role for a year, but I've been in the mining industry for many years, and certainly it's been a year of sort of constant disruption in terms of the maritime industry, but also more broadly the global economy. So it has felt like the disruption is constant.
I mean, the chaos of tariffs has almost been forgotten because of the last 2 months.
It has felt like it's been one after the other, and we've had to, be agile and resilient as a sort of maritime sector. And I've been incredibly surprised as to how agile and resilient the maritime industry is. And sort of Cyril, talked a lot about that in his presentation earlier. So I think as a maritime industry, the level of focus, across the globe, by various governments has certainly, I think, from what I've seen in the last 12 months, increased. But mainly because the importance of shipping has been sort of identified. And as a mining company, shipping is absolutely critical to our business because we need to be able to get our products from our mine sites, whether that's iron ore in Australia, coal in Australia, or copper in Chile, to our customers, which are predominantly in Asia, but also in Europe and the United States. So shipping for us has always been critical. And yes, I think there has been that sort of recognition by governments across the world how critical it is. And so ensuring that, there is a sort of robust shipping industry for various regions, I think has been a big factor. For us as a business, we think very long term, we plan very long term. So I think one of the strategies we've employed not only as a business, as a mining company, but also my team, is just seeing through that volatility, staying the course with your strategy, building enough resilience, flexibility, and sort of depth in our freight book, for example, allows you to sort of ride through the volatility, the increased interest that you might see, and it just allows you to stay quite steady.
You're trying to take out the noise from the signal, sort of thing, to use a cliche.
Yeah.
Punit, you have obviously spent a lot of time looking at risk across your career in the broadest sense, and still now. What feels different about these times than recent history in your experience?
Thank you very much.
And what are the lessons, importantly, to be drawn?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I think it's great to be here and also to hear Cyril. One of the things I would like to start before I answer the question is to just thank all the seafarers, because in all these commercial conferences, one of the things that we must try and look at is the contribution that comes from the sea. So I actually feel that every time I speak, I feel more disconnected with the fact that people at sea are not being acknowledged in most cases. So I hope that all of us remember that space as we go along. But coming back to that, that's one of the things that has changed over the years. Technology has really been a differentiator today. Because of that, the availability of information has actually created more challenges. The global connectivity that is actually there, I mean, the wars in the Gulf are not something which are new. We've actually had the 2 Gulf Wars before, and we've had issues crop up. But at that point of time, we didn't have the connectivity challenges, the global connectivity of each other countries, the Chinese aspects, and other things were not really present in the same measure. And this is where it's different. Now the dependency has actually become a curse in some ways, because you are suddenly impacted by what's happening in the Middle East. Earlier, you did not have that kind of an impact. Even though Mr. Trump says that it's only 2.5% of stuff that moves into US from Hormuz, but believe it or not, even that 2.5% can create a 90% impact on their GDP space at the end of the day, fertilizers being one of the classic examples. So there are connectivity factors which are present today, which were not there 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The interesting thing about shipping is, and I like to say this to my students, that essentially it's the same jungle. The animals have changed, so the weapons that you need to actually have with you to manage those animals are very different. And
That's
really,
a good analogy, I must
right.
say.
The jungle is not different. The only thing that is really interesting from my perspective is that the ship owners are now going to start using information to share things with each other. That is where the real agility is at a different level altogether. Let's start sharing stuff the way we actually do business with each other, warn each other, get into a kind of collaborative spirit. And I think there is a good chance that we can learn more lessons from this and become more resilient and more powerful as an industry. At the end of the day, the customers need delivery of the goods. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. At the end of the day, the shipping still is going to transport the goods that they were transporting unless there's demand destruction. So somebody is going to pick up a cargo which was coming from the Middle East instead of that coming from somewhere else. But at the end of the day, you still need to share those best practices and start getting more resilient as you go along. Multilateral organizations, which, by the way, Mr. Trump is destroying very quickly, is not an easy space for us right now, but we would like to see more service being provided to our members going forward. That's really the goal for us to keep the resilience moving, yeah.
Peter, coming to you, thinking about the fragmentation of trade, the risk of fragmentation of trade, and I suppose more particularly inefficiency versus opportunity there. You're managing, obviously, sort of pretty hefty freight exposures. Are you being forced to manage sort of resilience over efficiency to ensure that you do continue to provide the service that is necessary in these troubled times?
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas where you want yes to both when you get asked. It's not like you don't like the trade-off, but it's something you've got to balance. I think underpinning for us, particularly in our sort of global trade, and whether it's in the small ships or the larger ships, we really sort of are very much focused on one, ensuring we secure that supply chain for our underlying asset base within Anglo-American. But additionally to that, which has been part of our strategy for some time now, is to then have an operating model that allows us to use that equity base to leverage off and generate more value through freight activities, which again presents a risk profile for us to be able to manage some of these ups and downs that we see. But that's very much underpinned by a very clear sense of where we believe we need to be when it comes to safety and sustainability. I think what we've seen in this, this sort of period, and I think that the point was made, it's not, this isn't new, what we're going through now. It's just a bit more visible, and it's probably hitting every element, and we're living in an environment now where everything sort of plays out on social media and Twitter and so forth, which sort of keeps us all awake at different times of the night. But I think that has always been there. But what we've found, and it plays to the resilience. I think the efficiency thing is always a challenge, but it's always the underlying driving what you do. But it's really, really important that you continue to lean into your values, and that's something that doesn't change even when these challenges come about. And you might have a good commercial position or whatever it might be, and you'll obviously try and optimise that. But if you stay true to those key values within your business, which is particularly around things around safety, sustainability, then you should be heading in essentially the right direction, and you will ensure that you get that resilience as well as trying to achieve some of those operational efficiencies as well. But look, that's as putting on the mining company hat, and I'm sure Emma's the same. As said, shipping is so critical to our business. The holes in the grounds are useless unless we can get the product to the customer. So we need to ensure that is such an important part of the business, that we are resilient. That even in these challenges, whether they're direct in terms of trying to get product into regions which are difficult, or whether we're dealing with high fuel prices, it's very much our role to ensure that we can provide that service back into the business. So that remains a priority. Safe, reliable ocean freight.
Emma, just sort of building on that, how do you balance sort of the cost, resilience, and reliability when there are these so many pressures to continue to deliver what you need to do?
Oh, I mean, what Peter said is absolutely the same position we take. Our priority, as for my team, is delivering that operational excellence in the service that we provide to our business to make sure products get to customers, because without that, we don't have a mining business. And as Peter said, it's making sure we do that safely, efficiently, and as cost-effective as possible. But as a mining company, our end-to-end supply chain from pit to port to customer is, we optimise it all the time, and getting that as streamlined as possible is the priority. Safety, obviously, the first priority, but then it's getting that optimised. So my team needs to make sure our part of that supply chain is optimised as much as possible. So cost, absolutely, of course, we want to ensure we're providing a cost-effective service, but the priority is safety and then really getting it as efficient as possible. So, exactly what Peter said, our priority has been, even with this volatility, we make sure that the right vessel, so the safe vessel, the sustainable vessel, is where it needs to be at the right time and then gets to our customer on time, because their supply chains also matter.
Yeah. Thomas, Peter mentioned the fact that shipping is and remains and will remain absolutely critical to not only these supply chains but the world economy. Yet there are these very real operational pressures, but then there are these structural and regulatory pressures with the not quite the collapse, but the pressure being put on international regulation and the clarity of international regulation. Trying to think of this as a constructive process, how can the shipping industry, how can the members of your associations, how can they work to extract the value for the industry looking ahead from the need for shipping and the profile that it has bursting into our living rooms and on our phones every minute of the day at the moment?
Yeah, I fully echo what my fellow panelists said before in terms of excuse me, safety, commitment, excellence. And I think, I'm trying to link this with the previous question. Shipping always bounce back when it comes to challenge, because unfortunately for most of the for the world, they don't see the ships. They don't live next to the port. They're not involved. However, whenever we have such a crisis,
they're seeing them on Instagram every 5 minutes at the
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Though.
But
maybe not not some of BHP's bulkers, but certainly
what I'm trying to say, Julian, is that the connection that we now have with all these developments, that it shows that not the interdependence on shipping, but the quality and commitment to high standards, marine environment protection, all these things that we've been saying, now it's been proven that never mind what's going to happen, shipping is going to be there. Adjust and be resilient to come back to normal life, hopefully very, very soon. And this is what we stay committed to, and we, at every opportunity we have, whether that's on a national level through our national associations, to our governments, and then their governments are going to go to the international regulatory bodies that they will set those standards to be implemented. And this is what we're trying to do on a daily basis, and brings us back to the same core values of high operational standards, safety, and all these things that we need to show to those who take decision for us.
Yeah, yeah. Punit, what's your view on these structural pressures on in the regulatory side of shipping, and the need to use an opportunity constructively?
Absolutely. I actually feel that every crisis brings opportunities and risks at the same time. In fact, the Chinese word for crisis is Weiji, which includes both danger and opportunity. So there is actually a very valuable lesson that we learn, saying that, first of all, this will create, let's say, an efficientizing of the shipping industry as such. Because in order to maintain a certain amount of regulatory compliance, you also need to have a certain amount of efficiency in your business. you will need to continue to service your customers, and that's the best part about this. What is happening with decarbonization, in my mind, is also not so much the shipping itself trying to regulate and get into the regulation space. The customers are going to start asking questions because they have, down the line, their shareholders asking the question, what kind of a carbon footprint do you have today in your business? So being a shipping industry, we are always going to be actually governed by what the customers are doing, and that includes the regulatory space, but also geopolitical space and other areas. It is going to be a customer-centric discussion at the end of the day. What is really interesting is that technology, and wearing the hat of an investor in various technology spaces as well in maritime, I find that a lot of innovative stuff is coming out to actually measure and also use these aspects of regulatory challenges which are there to try and differentiate yourself from your competitors. So this is where it's now starting to become a strategy. It's actually starting to become a strategy, and where not just the big players, but even the smaller players can have access to the same technology, use it in their own specific niche way, and start building some kind of a model around it. So I would see that there is going to be a two-tier market. There's already a two-tier market in some ways in the industry with regard to what the bigger players are doing and what the smaller players are doing. But the access to technology is kind of uniform and getting more and more uniform. I remember my CEO in Clavinus last year telling me many years ago, saying data is going to be available with everybody. It's the analytics that's going to set you apart. So remember how you actually analyze the data and use it to build actionable insights. So I think strategy-wise, the regulatory changes are always something that the industry has seen. The only thing is how the industry now marries it with technology to build a differentiating factor for each industry and company as well within the industry. Yeah.
Peter, could I put that to you? Obviously, data has been talked about and used in companies for years. Yet these times of crisis are pushing it into the public eye, not just the general public eye, the eye of politicians and regulators in a much higher level. What do you see as being the implications of that as we move forward with generally greater transparency of operations and then consequently the commercial space as well?
Big supporter of it. I mean, I think, the more transparency we can get, I think has been, really helpful. And we've seen it even through what we've been going through this year. The ability to really understand who we're trading with, what sits behind, whether it be, people talk about sanctions, that's obviously a key component, but it's much more than that. And I think, what we realize through the way we operate, whether it's, directly or doing stuff ourselves, we can't do it alone, and partnerships and relationships with owners and operators and regulators and some of the other supporters that we have, whether it be, NGOs or alike, is really, really critical for us to ensure that we, maintain our standards as a publicly listed company, and that people realise that. So I think that transparency has been really important for us to really get under the hood of who we deal with, and it is important when we have challenges at this level. I think what I would say, and I think it sort of links into what we've seen this year and probably what we've seen over the last few years in relation to some of the other challenges with shadow fleets and so forth, is there's good actors and that do the right thing and are holding themselves to the right standard and continuing to lift the bar. There's still a patch of crew and people, and I use crew in a more generic term, not necessarily seafarers, that need to come with us, and we need to bring them along. And I think that's always been the challenge. But yeah, huge support of the transparency. I think the more we can do, the more it definitely underpins the business we do, and it helps sell, our product and our shipping position back into our customers as well.
Emma, there's talk of the shadow fleet there, and while this isn't a tanker panel, and you're not an oil company, but a mining company, I think the rise of the shadow fleet, the dark fleet, the parallel fleet, whatever term one wants to put on it, is one of the biggest issues that faces the shipping industry globally. Have you been touched by the questions around that and the threats to compliance and the pressure for compliance, of course, and how have you adapted to managing those?
I mean, it hasn't touched us directly, Julian, but as Peter said, for us at BHP, our values are the absolute driving force of how we do our business. So whomever we do business with, we have, very rigorous compliance processes, and that cascades down to our maritime service providers. So we use various, platforms to ensure we know exactly who we're trading with. We know where the ships are going and who they're in, making sure they are going, where we've directed them to go, and sanctions compliance is an incredibly important issue. And as a global mining company, it's not something you can afford to get wrong. So we, are very, very rigorous in that across the business, whatever sort of area of the business we are. But certainly for my team, it's something, we've always maintained a focus on. So I think we've just continued to maintain that focus through this period.
Thomas, the rise of the dark fleet has really created a not just a parallel fleet, but it's a parallel operating system, a parallel sort of universe with flags, with registered organisations being fraudulent, with charterers, with obviously cargo owners as well as ship owners and brokers involved. What is the damage being done to the status of the business, and how can that be mitigated and controlled?
I think it's the question about the parallel fleet. It's a very good example of what we consider to be, if you like, the biggest problem in shipping today. Most people will think, well, it's decarbonization because of the ongoing discussions and things like that, but the real thing is what we started discussing earlier this morning, which is the erosion of international regulatory framework. This is a very good example of what this problem creates for the industry on a day-to-day basis, on the regulatory, on the commercial, on the operations. As far as the International Chamber of Shipping, we have a very clear position on that when it comes to making sure the advice we give to our members for the compliance for the applicable international conventions and the proper coverage by insurance and things like that. Yes, it is an issue, but if we consider the roots of that problem, it's not something that created from the industries created by the lack of international regulatory framework and the inspection system. At the same time, though, we not just accept it and move on and say these are the good guys, they're the bad guys. We're trying to raise the matter, and we've done so at the proper venue, which is, of course, the IMO and the legal committee, to try and, I think for us, the most concerning thing is the fact that you've just mentioned that you see fraudulent registries, which we never had before, at least in that sort of level of growth. And this is very dangerous because it creates a very bad image, if you like, for the industry. Well, you have the vast majority operating under the highest standards we've discussed before this. Now we see this when it comes to fraudulent registers, and that's an obligation not on the industry, but on the regulators. And when it comes to, at least to ICS, I remember 30 years ago, well, 25 years ago, we set a flag state performance table. It's one of the things I got involved through my previous job. The industry itself came together and listed a very detailed list of points that ship owners should take into account before they make their decision, whichever flag or registry, both in terms of compliance with the applicable conventions, but also in terms of high operation standards. This is a and this has been adapted by the IMO. So as far as the representation side of the industry, we're doing our best to make sure that we show to the world the high standards of operation we have and the way that this issue should be addressed, and can only be addressed by the regulators themselves. Because if they allow this to continue, there are ways to deal with it, but it's a matter of lack of political will or not enough political will to find a way to tackle this. But again, I started with, let me finish, but for us, this is a byproduct of the bigger issue. The erosion that we keep seeing nowadays of the international regulatory framework, because it's not just this issue. You see it on other issues, regional matters, protectionist, tariffs, closure of straits, all these things, they go back to the original problem, which is the erosion of the international regulatory framework. But I don't want to finish this by just being negative. Yeah. This, at the same time, as I said before, or pessimistic, not negative, it goes to the heart of the matter of how important and our industry is to the world trade and the world economy. And this is an area where we keep pressing to show the importance and the relevance. Let me just finish by that. I would never have thought that I would see some media comments, for example, that in the current conflict in the Iran, US and the Persian Gulf, that the use of straits or the maritime traffic can become stronger than the threat of nuclear power.
Yep, I have heard that as well. I just had a point here, Julian, about the fact that this is where the connectivity of the world becomes an interesting challenge also, because the shadow fleet is servicing those customers in those countries, whether India, China, or others, who are essentially also having regular shipments coming into them with the usual fleet and the so-called light fleet, as I call it, or whatever. At the end of the day, what they're doing is they're trying to then create their own mechanisms, their own insurance setups, their own P&I clubs. They're launching these ideas because they know that they need to have both of them coming. Now here it's a challenge internally for the global shipping industry. How do you differentiate that? Because you can't stop doing business with a customer or a country just because he's also actually having stuff coming from Russia or other places. And that is where geopolitically it's now becoming, I need to look out for my interests first and then look out for other people. That is where Thomas's point is really correct. International global order is collapsing because people are looking more inward than outward. The last time this happened was during COVID.
This is all part of what is clearly a more polarized world.
Yep.
It's polarized politically, and it's polarized through trade and business at every level, particularly east to west, with China versus the US. That inevitably, though, brings inefficiencies into the system. Shipping, as we've been saying, and it deserves huge credit for this, has shown great resilience in being able to work out a way of moving the goods. However, that soaks up tonnage, which lifts rates. So why are we all going to cry about this? How do you resolve that sort of conundrum? That this may not be a particularly likable situation, but actually, for the industry in the round, there are a lot of people who aren't so unhappy about it. Punit or Wemmer even.
I mean,
I'm being slightly provocative, but
yeah. I mean, certainly for us, as I said before, efficiency is critical, and it goes without saying that to the extent the industry is agile, but it is building in inefficiency, whether it's longer routes or the like. So, and then we see it in freight rates, which is something we have to adjust to and to absorb as part of getting our products to our customers. So, I think it's inevitable there will be a degree of inefficiency built into the industry. My team's job is to adapt to that and still continue to be as efficient as we can for our own supply chain, because for us it comes back to, as I said, we're a mining company. We want to be as efficient as possible. So it's something we just have to adapt to and absorb.
Peter, you were chuckling ironically at that scenario.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, we like low freight rates, just to put that out there.
As do we.
Just to be very clear, which is difficult given where we're at. But yeah, and I think Emmett's right. I mean, it's the inefficiency tends to be a bit baked in, and it really is whether it's us ourselves or leaning into the industry to try and find take that sort of value back is really quite critical. But I think what we see, and it's not just some of the economics and the geopolitical, I think even when you get into some of the conversations around decarbonisation as well, was creating some industrialisation of trades and making some inefficient routes as well. So I think we're always trying to deal with whether it's geopolitical or sustainability, or it could be a safety area as well. Again, I keep coming back to it, those underlying values are really underpinning some of the decisions that we make. And that's not a bad thing if that brings some sort of inefficiency, as long as we're doing it for the right reasons. Because I think, as an industry, we should be incredibly proud of how we've sort of overcome those over time. So, underpinned by good values.
Emma.
Julie, maybe I can just add to that. There's certainly, as we said, the volatility builds in a degree of inefficiency. But I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that the opportunity is to actually leverage the technology, the AI that we're seeing, to improve efficiency in other ways. So, we're doing that as a mining company. It's incredible now how much efficiency you can build into your business productivity through innovation and technology. So I think there's a real opportunity to perhaps counter some of that volatility through gains, through productivity, innovation, use of data, AI, which will help the industry sort of counter some.
And I think that plugs in. Does that plug into one of those aspects that Cyril was talking about?
Absolutely.
The relationships with charterers. Obviously, you're on
Exactly.
on one side, the other side,
Yeah.
and Peter, you're on both sides in some areas. But the efficiencies through closer, more understanding partnerships, the industrial shipping, is going to have leverage in these unstable worlds going forward.
Absolutely, Julian, and I should have mentioned that before, but our partnerships with EPS, is a very important partner for us, but there's others, and I can see them in the room. And it's only through those close partnerships where we're actually looking to innovate together that we can then drive efficiencies within our own supply chains. So we absolutely rely on our vessel owners, and we're sort of really looking to work together to sort of build that, build new innovation together.
Absolutely. No, I just had a point to add, saying that inefficiencies can always result in windfalls like you talked about. But at the end of the day, the customers need a delivered cost. And they will actually always evaluate which is the best kind of fit at the end of the day. So trade patterns do change for a while because they don't have any options available to look at, but they will continue to look at alternate sources because at the end of the day, something which is coming from far is now not freight-wise profitable. They'll actually look at sources which were close by, but they were more costly. But now the delivered cost is actually still cheaper than importing something from far away. So I think trade eventually adjusts, like the water finds its level, I think trade finds its level. The question is, how quickly can it find its level? Today, because of technology, visibility, connectivity, it's faster than before. That's the only change that has really come about in the last few years, I would say. Yeah.
And just to add to that, I think the motivation's not always economic. Yes, that's the thing. I think that's what we're starting to see. Like maybe a higher quality product is further away, but it lowers the cost of of how I smelt the product down the track. So I'm prepared to pay a bit more on freight to get the product that's more efficient. Or it could be, as we've talked about before, again, I want to deal with high quality producers that have safe, sustainable operations. So I might pay a bit more on freight to get access to those guys. So, I think that's where that relationship with customers, charterers, ship owners, back into the producers,
additional layer,
everyone's got a seat at the table.
Agreed.
And from top to bottom, the business is becoming more sophisticated to try and pull these levers. Emma, I did just want to specifically ask you about your Future Fit Academy as a project, which I think is particularly noteworthy with this partnership with Oldendorf to try and upgrade.
Absolutely. Thanks, Julian. I mean, first of all, as Puneet said, so this is a diversity partnership we've launched with Oldendorf, focused on bringing more females into the seafaring population. And we've talked a lot yesterday, about the importance of seafarers, and obviously their safety at the moment is absolutely critical. BHP, we over a decade ago made a very bold target to have over 40% females in our business, and that was at a time when I think it was sort of 10 to 12%, very low numbers across our business. And last year we achieved that target, and we brought some sort of 10,000 females into our business. So when I came into this role, the similarities between the mining industry, which was a very male-dominated industry, remote mining sites, very physical, tasks and activities, and the maritime industry were sort of really quite apparent to me. And so I sort of wanted to partner with some of our ship owners to really see how our sort of journey, the lessons we've learned, the difficulties, the hurdles, and the tools that we've sort of developed could be applicable to the maritime industry. We've heard yesterday, we've heard today, there's a huge number of seafarers that need to be brought into the industry. There's a real talent crisis that I think we'll be facing, and it was similar to the mining industry. And we have a sort of pool of very talented individuals that the maritime industry is not tapping into yet. So it's just at the moment an opportunity to share, but also hear from Oldendorf. They've got an incredibly successful cadetship program, and we've got a similar program that we use in across our business to bring more females in. So it was an opportunity to sort of share that, but then more broadly across some of the things we've had to grapple with, whether it's, as I said, remote working sites, safety and security, PPE that needs to fit properly, tasks that need to be adjusted to make them more safe for everybody.
And that
All
was
of that kind of
changing the
stuff.
culture holistically
Exactly.
rather than
Plus
just the
a
individual.
change of culture.
Yep.
And so we're really hoping to drive demonstrable change through action. So it's just the start.
Great.
Thomas.
Just to congratulate and encourage for more of this, because especially what we're going through now in the Persian Gulf, that we have so many thousands of seafarers being stranded, and I fully agree in terms of our first priority, as always and will always be the safety, but also the well-being and the mental health.
Yep.
And I think if we are saying that we have 800,000 seafarer shortage coming up in a few years, and we need to attract the best talent, first of all, maintain what we have, and then to attract. And I think the fact that, of course, the industry is working on two sides. One is the improvement of efficiency, compliance, but at the same time is the continuous reinvestment in the people, both ashore as well as at sea. I was very thrilled to hear about the cycling social cohesion from Cyril before, which is brilliant.
Welcome to join us on Thursday morning.
Yeah. When I turn as fit as you, I will do, but I'm trying to. But my point I'm trying to make is that we need to continue to show and tell good stories like yours and many others in the room that they do, because that's the only way we'll be able to maintain the attraction to our industry, especially during the very difficult, turbulent times that with the media and the seafarer, male or female, sitting on a ship in the Persian Gulf, not knowing that it's going to be attacked, or when it's going to be attacked, or when it's going to be released. That's also something that we need to pay particular attention, and we do. And this will continue through good help of media people like you.
You're too kind, you're too kind. Very nearly out of time, so I just want to, final questions to wrap up, looking ahead, frankly. Are you optimistic that shipping can overcome the fragmentation and this polarization and actually become more global? Or are we risking entrenching this sort of regional, politically aligned, divided world? Certainly that's the case in the near term, but in the medium to longer term. Thomas, you are, if not paid, certainly obliged to have views on these things. Your thoughts?
My usual answer is that I'm a natural and paid optimist. So it depends on how you see my salary, but joking aside, we have no choice. In terms of an industry that's so many centuries, and as far as we see, and I think it's been mentioned many times here today and in other panels during this week, we need to turn this challenge, this attack on the global system and bring it back. I heard sometime in Geneva the term re-globalization. Which when I first heard it from the WTO Secretary General, I thought, well, that's a bit of a new niche thing. For us, as International Chamber of Shipping, we would like to make sure that we make good use of this opportunity that I'm talking about the latest developments as well as the ongoing sort of regionalist protectionism, to show the benefit of not doing that, the need to readjust, going back to international sort of framework, security, predictability, in order to have the investment and the sustainability. It's very nice. We didn't touch the passionate fruit of decarbonization today. I'm sure there may be others to do that. But in order to do that, you have to show sustainability and hopefully profitability for the people to invest in this industry. And the only way you can do it is by making sure you have stable international standards and clear regulatory system and enforceability. And this is something we remain committed, and I'm sure that we will make it, at the end of the day, make sure that this is coming across even more clearer, using these opportunities that we have, which look negative, but we can turn them around to be positive.
Pundit, is this world of black swans going to get ever worse in coming years?
I think the shipping is a resilient industry, but it will, what I call, will need a hybrid approach. It will need to go back to old values and basics of the business in terms of what customer centricity is all about. It's like going back in some ways to the customer centricity than just talking about technology. At the same time, they'll still have to embrace the technology because that is what the next generation of maritime professionals will ask for. We have to be aware of the fact that the leaders who are going to come in the next 10, 15 years are going to be digital natives, and they look at technology as a default setting rather than something which comes as a second thought. This is where it's interesting, but they still need values at the end of the day. They still need old school, which is what worries me most of the time with this remote work and work from home, because honestly, you're not getting mentored. You're not getting the right kind of understanding of what the business is all about.
Thereby speaks the lecturer.
So in some ways, I think there is a different approach that is needed, what I call a hybrid approach of going back to old values and basics, but at the same time, embracing the new. But it's not going to be easy because it's just become very difficult with what's happening in the world. Yep.
Peter.
I'll be really quick. I think we've got a really good industry that's got a really good heart. We'll be okay.
I think the uncertainty will continue, but I'm absolutely confident the industry will continue to adapt and reimagine the way it does its business to respond.
Well, that positive note to end a session around in these troubled times. That's an uplifting place. I think we must end it. So, to all the panelists, thank you very much indeed for your time and contributions. If you'd like to show your appreciation, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, folks. Thanks. Thanks. Sorry. And we now have our second panel of the morning just before the lunch break, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our moderator for this panel, Sue-Ann Gann from Norton Rose, the leading law firm. Sue-Ann has offered to take the burden today, so I hugely appreciate that, Sue-Ann. Thank you. Great to see you.
Can I invite my panelists on stage, please? Hello? Hey, hi.
So have I introduced Hello, sir. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Okay, so for the people that are leaving this room, I assure you this panel will be interesting. And so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sue-Ann, and I'm a shipping partner with Norton Rose Fulbright. Welcome to what I think will be one of the more interesting sessions of this conference. The title of this panel is called, What is the Appetite for Risk Amid Geopolitical Volatility? And if you look at the world today, this question has never been more relevant for shipping. So we're sitting in a world where there's so much disruption. I mean, look at the Straits of Hormuz, look at all the sanctions regimes that has been created. And we're also living in a world where there is so much political tensions and shifts from elections to trade tensions and tariff escalations. These are all really redrawing, the global map of commerce in real time. So how do businesses make decisions? And for many of us in this room who are doing ship finance or seeking finance, the question is no longer whether geopolitics is going to affect your business decisions. It clearly will. So the question is how we manage it, how we price it, and whether we can still find opportunity within it. So to help us work through that, I have a panel of very outstanding financiers who sit on the sharp end of finance in their own special ways. And I'm sure they don't agree on any of this, but this is why it makes this conversation interesting. So let me briefly introduce them. I have Mark on the far end. He is a venture capital fund person, and he's actively investing in technology, consulting, and venture investing. He is the managing director of ReefNot. And then I have Joachim, who is managing director and regional head of Asia Pac at DNB, and he's a seasoned investment banker, so he will lead a different perspective from the cap markets. And I have Dimitri, who is very successful in building Asian ship finance activities within Asia, so he will lend his insights on Asian ship finance. And I have Gerbrand, who is global lead of ING shipping team, and he will give a very truly global perspective on banking in shipping. So welcome all of you, and maybe I'll start with the first question for Gerbrand. ING has one of the largest shipping portfolios of any bank globally. So from a global banking perspective, geopolitical risk now feels more permanent rather than cyclical. So from your viewpoint, has geopolitical risk fundamentally changed the way you would assess credit and deploy capital in shipping?
I think geopolitical risk has always been there, though historically the focus was more on country risk than geopolitical risk. And it has been a lot more complex in recent years. So if you take country risk, the bank's perspective was really about the collateral you have and the cash flows underlying the asset. And it was easier to identify. If you take geopolitical risk, it's very hard over the period of a loan to in advance say where your risk will really sit. And that is really where the analysis and the decision making has to be adjusted. And if you look at your protection as a bank, loan documentation, that's to your heart, is becoming a lot more critical because it's about the optionality you need if you look at your collateral. And we can look back at the invasion of the Ukraine and the sanctions against Russia and how banks have been able to unwind existing loan structures and protect their position. So yes, it certainly has affected how we do business, and that's both the flexibility as well as also the actions you take when, for example, sanctions cross your business.
Okay. So, I mean, investors often say, you know, it's easy to price credit risk, it's easy to price market risk because there's data, et cetera, to back it up. But geopolitical risk is a little bit harder to price. How do you approach this from your playbook, from your bank's perspective?
If you look at how a bank prices a loan, then there is the market, and that's the general availability of liquidity. And that's your internal pricing models, looking at the probability of default and your loss given default being the value of your collateral. If you look at geopolitical risk, your geopolitical risk sits partly in your internal models, and that can be, the country risk there. But it is indeed very, very hard to price it. And I think market pricing is a lot more relevant, and that's where you see where the premiums come in. Shipping, however, is a long-term business, and again, we're living with a very short focus at the moment, where change is constant. And so to look ahead 5-10 years and price the risk of geopolitical, that's very, very hard.
Thank you for that. And how does this change your risk appetite for shipping? As your bank, are you pulling back? Are you actively jumping into it?
It hasn't changed our risk appetite. I think what you want to avoid is concentration risk. And as long as you have diversity in your business, and that can be regional, that can be across different sectors, then you're able to respond and not get caught up in the concentration risk.
Thank you for that. Dimitris, I will move on to you. So 2 years ago, we were on the same, you were in the same seat at a TradeWinds conference here in this room, and you said, and I quote, "Nobody cares about money, everybody has money. There is a lot of money chasing very few projects." This was referring to a world where there was, abundant liquidity, where owners were in the driving seat. So let's fast forward today. So geopolitical risk, as I said earlier, is no longer transient. It's like an occasional shock. And it's going to be occasional shocks, and it's going to be permanent. So the question for you is, how has that shifted the way Asian financial institutions, whom you're very involved in Asia, banking, how do you see them assessing lending opportunities in shipping? And do you still think there is too much capital chasing very few deals?
Good morning to everybody. Thank you, Swan. Can you ask me the second question? In the same way you asked, you made the introduction, because I want to give a very short answer.
Okay. So do you want me to quote what was on the...
No, the question.
Okay, so the question is there still too much capital chasing too few deals?
My answer is the Pope Catholic? Okay. If you do not have money in today's environment, you're in the wrong business. And I know you are dying for another front line. Julian is there. Okay, so I'm afraid about what TradeWinds will put again after 2 years. Okay, if you are in shipping in today's environment and you're not awash with liquidity, I can tell you you are in the wrong business. Something has gone wrong. So what was the first question?
You need to pay attention.
Okay. The thunder's outside. Look outside. Look.
The first question was, have you seen any of these geopolitical risks affected the way Asian financial institutions assess, how they deploy capital?
Okay, let me rephrase now what I said before about the owners. If you are a bank, so if you are an Asian bank, and you do not want to do shipping in today's environment, maybe you should reconsider whether you want to have a shipping practice. Okay, that said, a lot of financial institutions are very, very conservative, not all of them. The current geopolitical situation has more or less, I think, changed the switch in the Asian banks into risk off. They're very, very concerned. Understandably, their economies, inflation, most of the business they are banking are under tremendous pressure, and that goes all over, the whole banking system. And that makes them question also their activities in shipping. I find it very strange. I meet Asian banks almost on a daily basis. When they ask what are the repercussions of the war in Iran in shipping, you just roll your eyes and you realize that they do not know what we're talking about. Okay? Are they interested in shipping? They are. Are they, worried? Definitely. Some of them have pulled the brakes, so they are, trying to understand a little bit more better what is going on. However, I believe they will miss the train, at least, the ones in the next couple of months, because of banks like the ones next to me, which understand shipping, and they understand that their borrowers, their clients right now are actually, printing money, even more so than 2024. So yes, the Pope is Catholic. If you don't have money right now, something is wrong.
Okay, take note. So
for you.
So everybody has money still, and how about discipline in capital? I think this was a theme that was quite brought up yesterday on the, during Singapore Maritime Week first day. Would you say that geopolitical disruptions tend to scare capital away from shipping assets, or do you actually think that this volatility actually creates better entry points for people who are more disciplined?
Okay, I think it really depends on the sector that you are active in. We're working a lot with European-based owners and predominantly some of the people in the Greek shipowning community. I think most of them are in shipping exactly for what's happening today. Obviously, they do not like wars. Shipping is cyclical, shipping is unpredictable, and that's why they do shipping. They are there in order to be able to weather the storm. And I said 2 years ago, we are privileged, we are very lucky. All of our clients right now are the survivors of a crisis that started in 2008 and ended up sometime in 2018, 19. Okay, so they're very strong. They know the cycles, they know the markets, and just now they are riding the wave. I think most of them see it as a great opportunity to obviously boost their profitability and expand. Order new ships, more fuel-efficient ships, potentially expand into different sectors. I think this is it. This is the time. They've been waiting for it for a long, long time, and now they are, I think, taking advantage of what's in front of them.
That's great. And I mean, for the Asian banks that you say don't really understand the repercussions of the geopolitics in shipping, would you say that they would, do you think that they might be creating more conservative terms in their financing, or do you think they're going to put in more stringent provisions to address this whole situation, or how do you see this coming?
I think, listen, building up on the 2024 statement, I will say that right now, the same principle applies. A lot of money worldwide, and Joachim will tell us more about capital markets, which right now seem to love what's going on, okay? From European banks to Asian banks to Chinese leasing, everybody loves shipping because the clients' balance sheets are impressive, to say the least. If you do not take advantage of what is in front of you right now, I will tell you, you will regret it 2 or 3 months or 4 months, 6 months later on, simply because the banks will realize they are not doing their targets for the year, and the clients are becoming more and more demanding. Will there be money available? Yes, it will definitely have an impact on the pricing and the terms that the banks will be able to achieve. I think it remains a borrower's market. These borrowers have a lot of negotiating power. So it will definitely be a very competitive landscape.
Thank
I
you.
don't know, Gabriel, if you agree.
Do you agree?
I agree.
So I'll move on to Joachim. So since Dimitri mentioned about the capital markets, so DNB has been in the press quite recently with a few notable transactions, and one of them was the BW Group and Navigator Gas for BW Group's secondary sale of its stake in Navigator Gas. And DNB acted as joint book runner in the transaction, so very well, a big congratulations for that. Given the themes that we are discussing today, geopolitical volatility, shifting trade routes, sanctions risk, all these big sort of risks, what does it tell us about investor appetite for shipping assets right now from the market that you sit in? A deal like the BW one that we mentioned, can be done. So what's your view on geopolitics in your sector, in your capital markets?
Well, I think it's pretty interesting. Obviously, when there are big things happening, like the outbreak of the war in Iran, I think it takes a little while for the market to sort of wrap their head around, the implications. And obviously, shipping is also quite complicated, maybe more complicated than what people realize. So I think people spend some time analyzing the situation, and there was some market reaction to that. But I think also the underlying thing here is that investors always take the longer view, and I think the underlying investor assumption here is that there will be some solution to the conflict in Iran. I know there's still a lot of uncertainty, but I think the market sort of perception is that there will be a solution. So I think the focus is more on what's next at this point in time. I think what we've seen also is that shipping stocks have been performing very well across sectors, really, tankers, gas, all doing really well. A lot of companies trading close to all-time high. A number of companies also trading above NAV, and that based on high asset values. So the market has been remarkably strong, I would say, from an equity point of view, compared to the news flow in the press. And this is opening up for a lot of opportunities from a capital markets perspective. So you mentioned the deal we did for BW Group and Navigator Gas, which was very successful, done at a very tight discount. We also raised money for Cadelier, which is also part of the BW Group, in a private placement, $203 million. That was also very well received in the market. That's sort of obviously on the outside of what's going on in the Gulf, but it shows you that there's a risk appetite for shipping. We also did $375 million convertible bond for Scorpio, which was done on the back of a high share price. That's based on a 35% premium. It's a 5-year deal. Coupon is 1.75%. So that means that essentially, if you take that money and put it in a bank account, you have a positive carry, you know. And so it's an interesting market at the moment, and I think really for shipping companies, beyond what you mentioned in the bank market and the traditional lending market, you know, all avenues are really open when it comes to being able to raise equity, also doing bonds, convertibles, as I mentioned. The sale-leaseback market is wide open. Alternative credit is there. Just to mention on the bond market also, I think the bond market is maybe not as strong as it was 6 months ago, but it's definitely still very constructive. It's still open. I think maritime credits typically being strong, you know, well positioned to still tap into that market. Still a very attractive marketplace in terms of speed of execution, terms, and also what we see is that a lot of shipping companies that normally wouldn't be looking at the high-yield bond market, they're looking at this as a complement to existing bank debt and other, you know, financing instruments that they have on their balance sheet. So the market is remarkably strong, and you know, I think it's positive for the industry, even though the backdrop is more negative.
So would you say that you know, investors are leaning into this, you know, to the capital markets despite the noise around it?
Yeah, I'm not saying they. I think, you know, it's more that they look beyond the war. You know, I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, you know, when something new happens, it always takes a while for investors to understand the implications. You know, how long will the conflict be? You know, what will be the long-term damage here? And I'm not sure investors have fully processed all the long-term implications of this. But I think the working assumptions in the broader investor market is that, I mean, this will pass.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, with this whole geopolitical volatility, has this actually changed the way you will look at how you get a shipping deal done? For example, have you always priced in this sort of risk when you're looking at a deal?
I think investors in general are, you know, used to geopolitical risk related to shipping. I think what is a little bit new now is that shipping has become a lot more popular as an asset class. You know, I think that's a result of you know, several years of stronger earnings. You know, more dividends, you know, stocks being a success in the overall market. Also, it's a function of more consolidation, larger companies, you know, higher market caps, more liquidity. So basically, more shipping becoming more investable. So I think that has been a major driver when it comes to interest. I think what is a little bit particular about the situation now is that suddenly everybody you meet on the street, there's suddenly an expert on the Strait of Hormuz and shipping and everything. So I think definitely the conflict has been raising the profile of shipping, you know, quite considerably. But I think again, when it comes to doing deals, it's all down to, you know, long-term fundamentals, earnings. And not so much what's happening this week and next. But of course, you know, there is risk to that picture, and we don't know fully how this Iran situation will play out yet.
Yeah, they don't know, but I mean, from your perspective, you want them to have a plan, at least, on how to address it from wearing an institutional hat, wouldn't you?
Can you elaborate on that question?
Yeah, the question is, I mean, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. they may not know how to address it because everything is all moving pretty quickly, but you will want them to have at least some strategy on how to address the geopolitics.
Yeah, I think investors obviously, take risk into to account, when they're looking at investing into shipping and they're looking at, various outcomes. I think they put different probability on various outcomes. I think a lot of investors think that there's a lot of incentives on both sides in terms of, ending the war. So I think a lot of probability is being put on a solution one way or the other. I think actually for the stock market, exactly what the solution looked like is probably less important. I think an end to the hostilities and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz is more important than the politics on the ground. But obviously, still, this is out of investors' control. This is down to the politicians and what's happening on the ground there.
Thank you. So Mark, I guess that brings me to you. ReefNot sits, kind of at the intersection of venture capital and supply chain innovation. It's a little bit different to the other panelists who are traditional bank lending and capital markets. We've been hearing their perspectives. So from where you sit and looking at the lens from a tech perspective, how is the venture capital community looking at shipping and logistics assets at the moment?
Thanks, Suen. So maybe before I answer that, I'll give you a perspective of the geopolitical risk question, right? Especially how the venture capital industry has sort of taking this into consideration when it comes to investments, right? And the main difference here for venture capital is that for those that are not that familiar with VC, we do early to growth stage investments, mainly on the digital and tech side of things. But from a geopolitical perspective, I think it's very clear that there are some certain fundamental shifts that have occurred that are pretty much certain to continue over the next 5 to 10 years at least, right? One, it's really the bifurcation and regionalization. So it's not only China plus one, it's really regionalization, right? And why that's important is because it brings about network design changes, right? Changing, manufacturing closer to locations, to regions, shifting of value chains, that kind of stuff. So I think it's important to understand that because, shipping and by extension maritime and by extension ports are nodes, right? They're just nodes in the supply chain, right? The function of maritime and shipping and logistics is actually to bring supply to where the demand is, yeah? And if that network structure is changing, then the industry needs to kind of morph and change and readapt accordingly, right? So that is certainty. And with that change, every change brings about opportunities. And so from a VC perspective, obviously there are many opportunities just coming from this regionalization and bifurcation trend, right? So that's the first point. The second point, of course, is AI, right? And there are some loose statements made in the previous panel around, automation and stuff like that. But I think, AI, especially when it comes to, it's not just a broad ChatGPT, AI, whatever stuff, right? I think for the maritime and logistics industry, especially maritime, the greater implication, and you look at where capital is moving to in terms of AI, is actually in terms of port automation as well. So autonomous vehicles, robotics, that kind of stuff. A lot of spend going to port automation and going back to vessels as well, safety and stuff like that. And you see autonomous vessels coming up again. So AI on a broader basis, physical AI, computer vision, et cetera, and automation will continue, and that's a big driver in terms of not only global shifts, but also maritime itself. Now, the problem actually is the understanding of, while all that sounds very good, the problem is that maritime as a sector, and even the logistics as a sector, when it comes to venture capital spend, last year, it was like less than 2%, right? So even if we double up this year, it's not going to make a dent. And that's just logistics, not even maritime, right? So if you take maritime as like 25% of logistics in general, which is, it's being generous, right? It is nothing, right, in the venture capital space. Okay, that being said, if we look towards 26, and if you look towards the impact of specifically what's happening in the Middle East right now, there is a huge deployment of capital into dual-use technologies, right? It can be maritime, but it's also defense, for example, right? So these, think of it as autonomous drones, that kind of a thing, right? Satellite technologies, location intelligence. So all these are dual use where it is relevant for the maritime industry, but it is just as relevant for defense. So there's a lot of capital going into that direction right now, right? So as a venture capital firm, going back to your question, as a venture capital firm, we look at all of these trends and we sort of identify which are the ones that are investable. Because must also, that's why the panel is so diverse as well, right? Because, from a capital perspective, not all capital is created equal, and not all risks are created equal as well, right? So, for some types of investments, right, venture capital makes sense, where you're looking at 5 to 10 year exit cycles, of a certain kind of IRR, and a certain kind of scale that we need to kind of, to grow it, right? But on the other hand, the other perspective is on the asset side of things. And there's a famous acronym which is HALO, right? So on the one hand, a lot of capital is going towards AI, so huge capital, like more than 50% of venture capital went to AI in the US last year, so a huge amount. But on the flip side, HALO, which is high asset, low obsolescence, is also a big thing. Why? Because it is certainty, right? Some assets now are construed as strategic. Ports, inland container terminals, strategic. So many of the carriers are investing in those strategic nodes, right? Again, because there's that re-network design thing going on as well. And they effectively want to choke certain strategic locations in those regions, right? So that's a huge, so besides AI, that high asset piece, in terms of strategic assets, a lot of capital is moving towards that. Now, on the flip side, if we talk about vessels, and this one I'll be a bit, we got to be careful about overcapacity, right? So if you look at, profitability of carriers last year on a quarter-on-quarter basis, basically fourth quarter was a very tough quarter, and signs were bad going into 2026, right? And unfortunately, the Iran war happened, right? So when we talk about, yes, there's a lot of liquidity, there's a lot of capital, right? Actually, those that take longer-term points of views, really you have to look at the individual strategies of the carriers to really figure out, like MSC and Maersk, MSC, for example, and Maersk, there's a, in terms of growth of the fleets, for example, and order books, a certain amount, right? I think that's 30% order book, But if you look at ONE and who was the other one? Costco, right? We're looking at 40% order book, right? So some of these carriers are looking at it much longer and saying we need the capacity, we need to ensure we have control of the capacity, right? So it goes back to strategic asset decisions. Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about change, you talked about opportunity, then you gave some statistics. Do you think this whole noise around the geopolitics and the volatility in this market, do you think this might accelerate the demand for the kind of supply chain tech investments that we've not does?
I think the genie is out of the bottle. We will do a lot more investments. We'll do a lot more, tech-related investments in supply chain logistics in many areas, right? We've done investments in global trade management, digital documentation, EDBL type stuff, supply chain financing, etc. There will be more capital moving into this space in the future, absolutely, especially into logistics beyond maritime. There will be a lot of transformation, digital transformation. In the previous panel mentioned digitization, visibility, that kind of stuff, but that's just the beginning, right? The automation, the robotics, those kind of stuff, safety, all that, defense tech, the satellites, all that will happen over the next 5 to 10 years, right? That being said, there will be a lot of capital that will be burnt because as per, startups, most of them will not survive and the capital backing them effectively will be burnt, right? But the ones that survive will be the winners in the next generation, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Very conscious we only have 5 minutes, so I'll move very quickly to one of the topics that was discussed earlier on shadow fleet. Gerbrand, in your role, in your everyday role, what does the growth of the shadow fleet mean for mainstream lenders like yourselves? Does it shrink the addressable sort of market that you target, or do you think it creates opportunity for the compliant owners who remain?
Yeah, we have a well-defined target group of clients, and that's partly of the nature of ING and who we are as a financial institute. But it was said earlier, the erosion of the international regulatory framework is a real concern, is a real issue. And I think if it's the bank's perspective, we just have to be very careful about our reputation, because we might have defined our clientele, our tier 1 operators, but the shadow fleet is hanging over it. And you see it in terms of monitoring the collateral you have. I mean, sanction risk comes in from different angles. And you can look at construction phase, your shipyard. You might look at your charterer. You can look at your ship manager. And I think that's where, when you look at the shadow fleet, the threat is there that it may impact your overall business if you get caught out by getting involved in the shadow fleet one way or another. So does it provide an opportunity? Yes, I think longer term there will be opportunities for our clients, but the question is, what will happen with the shadow fleet when we will see the shadow fleet potentially going out?
Okay, thank you for that. And just on sanctions, Joachim, vessels are being seized and ports are blocked. I was reading the papers this morning, and the IMO SecGen was talking about shipping being used increasingly as collateral in geopolitical conflicts. So do you think that the politicization of shipping assets will make the sector more or less attractive to institutional capital in your space?
Well, I mean, sanctions is a broad sort of subject, obviously, and there are many types of sanctions. I think, if you look at Western investors, they typically very allergic to any type of sanction risk. So it's very black and white for them. I think when it comes to Asian institutions, leasing houses, they might be a little more pragmatic, willing to work with the counterpart in terms of structuring a deal that's still workable. I think what's happening now, exactly in the in the Gulf is hopefully short term, you know, and I think that's the working assumptions among most investors. So I don't see a very marked impact of that today, but obviously if this is a continued problem and countries are going to start to arrest each other's vessels, you know, on a more longer term basis, that's a whole different game. But I don't think that will happen, and I think the market doesn't think that will happen.
Thank you for that. And I mean, Dimitri, just to hear your views on what has been said, do you think that has shipping itself become a geopolitical tool, and what does it mean for, you know, the next cycle? What are the banks thinking about for going forwards?
Holy cow. I mumbled, holy cow. Listen, I think starting from COVID, people realized how important it is to, if not control, at least have some say, some influence on your supply chain, and how you make sure you get fuel and food and medical supplies to your own, if you want, population. Globalization has made sure that, you know, a lot of things are produced where they are not consumed, so people had to, you know, find a ways to bring them. Shipping bridged that gap. I think there was a shift towards some sort of, you know, national independence in strategic sectors, if I may say. In last year's TradeWinds event, we were talking about the rebirth of the US shipbuilding industry. Has gone great. 1 year later, I think we see great results out of that. I'm kidding, okay? I don't know. People would like to control everything. It's not that simple. There are specific countries which can do that. I think China is at the top of the list. Okay, is shipping part of, you know, a geopolitical question or answer? For sure, for sure. Unless you are, I don't know. Even Switzerland, I guess, imports stuff through shipping somehow. Now, about the banks, I think the banks will follow, and Gerben, you know, earlier on said that. I think it's less for the banks to say that. I think the banks will assess the risk and price it. Okay, I don't believe you will be asked to solve the geopolitical challenges of today, as long as you're not caught up in the wrong part of project. Okay, but I think this is it. I think, and shipping has been around for what, 5,000 years, simply because of that. Like, you know, shipping will decide whether you survive or not in a specific time of, you know, period of time.
Okay, very good. Shipping will survive. I like that. So final question, and you can share your views from your perspective. So last year there were mixed opinions on whether it's the right time to invest in shipping. You know, there was a lot of noise. No, it's not a good time to invest. It's too expensive. You won't be able to make returns to justify your risk. Why? There's the US recession risk. There's interest rate risk. Geopolitics, you know, as unclear outlook. But when things change, the system can actually see potential new opportunities. And given all this noise and disruption, what do you see as the most attractive opportunity in shipping right now? Maybe we start with Mark.
Oh, wow. Most attractive opportunity in shipping right now. If I put on my venture capital hat, honestly, it will not be specifically in shipping, right? Okay. There are some adjacent areas around shipping that I might look at. Those might be, I'm going back to autonomous drones, UAVs, you know, robotics, you know, port-related technologies, you know, satellite-related location intelligence stuff, right? General automation stuff. But specifically shipping, it is still very tough because as VCs, we need to generate a return on investment capital for our investors, and a bit difficult. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Okay, I'm gonna rephrase the question for Dimitri. So Dimitri, you don't have to answer that question, but the question is, to an investor who is sitting on the sidelines today, what is the biggest risk of not investing in shipping and supply chains right now?
Then if you have not invested by now, maybe take a break. I don't know. Like the share prices are so high, dividends are high. We haven't seen the Q1 results. I think it will blow up your mind, okay? Going in now, I don't know. I think it's, if you haven't gone in, I think it's better to stay out. In a conference last year, I said, you know what, buy low, sell high. What is low? I don't know. Joachim, you tell me no. You let me know. What is right now priced at a low, level? One thing I would like to say, picking up from Mark, and I've seen, usually I say follow your clients, look what your clients do, because that's a business, okay? They are the most successful investors right now, in multi-billion kind of levels. I think there is a niche kind of, tickets are very big, but on port facilities, infrastructure, I think some shipping companies have realized that this is a bottleneck, okay? I don't know how we can invest there, but there's something going on there. You can find the ships. Can you find the port? Yeah.
Okay. You can answer the traditional question.
I will take it a bit wider. So if I look at it, there have been a lot of signs in the last 12, 24 months that we're getting towards the end of a credit cycle. And that generally doesn't mean we will see the end of a credit cycle right now, but in the next months, years, we may see an event triggering financial distress in markets. And generally, it's about staying disciplined. It was mentioned earlier, there is a lot of liquidity which has come into the market. Some of that may have the experience of the cyclicality. Parts may and will not have that. So it's really about staying disciplined. We cannot just simply stop our business, and that counts for the investors, that counts for banks. You need to maintain a certain volume, but you do that with the knowledge that we are at a high part of the cycle, and ultimately, question is when, it will come down. Now, just be sure that when the market corrects, that you're not concentrated in one part of the market. And if you look at opportunities, to me, sustainability is the one major opportunity. And you see it in Asia, that China is investing a lot of money, and I strongly believe that we're sitting here in a position in Singapore of opportunity in that respect.
Thank you. Joachim, you have the last word from a capital markets perspective.
So unfortunately, or maybe luckily for myself, I'm prevented to give specific investment advice, especially on stage. But I think in general, actually the fundamentals in many shipping segments are quite strong. I'm not on the pessimistic side when it comes to the outlook. I think even though the sector will continue to be cyclical, companies have strong balance sheets. That means that they can survive tougher times a lot better than last time around when companies ran into trouble after the 2000s. I think also shipping lately has been continuing to surprise on the upside. So we just have to see if that continues to be the case or not. But certainly exciting ride and probably still ahead.
Okay, thank you for that. We are out of time, but I don't know if we have time for the questions or no? Okay, you may go for lunch. Thank you to my panelists.
Well, thank you.
And may I just say, many thanks to the panelists, and particularly to Sue-Ann for navigating that fascinating session there. If we could be back by 1:45 for the rest of the afternoon. Many thanks indeed.